Hey guys, how are you? I made this today. This is inspired by the Limitless talk. He is a Panditji of the Shimla Rodu district. I made this today with a ballpoint pen and some color pencils. And he is saying Char Ved hai. So amazingly, this Pahari Panditji knows Sanskrit and he was chanting Sanskrit shlokas on the podcast. Like, can you believe that? Okay, because I generally don't have that much exposure in person with, the Panditjis of the Himalayas, but they're very impressive as we have seen throughout these podcasts conducted by Mr. Nitish Rajput. And unfortunately, recently, His Holiness's brother, Gyalo Thondup, passed away. May he have a peaceful time in the bardo. And we pray for his family members, as well as along with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And recently, I learned from reading this book that we're about to get into that the area where His Holiness is located, Kangra district, is actually one of the more notable Pahari kingdoms. So I sensed there was like a lot of tension last year, there in between like different people living there. And I didn't really know why, but then now reading this book, it's like much more obvious to me, like what is going on. There's not just the, sociological inequalities, but also this interest in appearing modern, but also traditional. So that is like one of the challenges, right? Like this Panaji was wearing like a suit over his kurta. And I think that kind of symbolizes the same thing that people experience there. Jai Maa Kali. And today my Guruji from Kullu also reached out and he invited me to collaborate with him. And I was so happy to get his message. And I hope he is also doing well. And we are hoping for stability in the region. We do not want another, problematic time like the past year. Everyone was like holding their breaths while also dealing with their own household issues. So, right. This book is part of the series Asian Borderlands and published by Amsterdam University Press. I will link the Amazon link down below. So if you're interested in a hard copy, you can get it. Beyond the Bilaspur-Kangra rivalry, Sirmaur 1795 to 1815. So Bilaspur and Kangra are two regions in Himachal Pradesh, and Sirmaur is actually bordering Uttarakhand today. Despite its enshrinement as the canonical narrative of the West Himalayan transition to modernity, the life story of Sansar Chand overlooks significant variations in the reactions of mountain kings and subjects to foreign domination. The juxtaposition of sovereigns with alien Gorkhas is particularly misleading, for events in neighboring kingdoms suggest these two parties actually had a great deal in common. The artifice behind this facile, superficial dichotomy is particularly evident in the history of Sirmaur between the Battle of Chinjiar and the instatement of British rule. Although indirectly affected by the Bilaspur-Kangra rivalry, the Easterly Kingdom's trajectory reveals that the Gorkha conquests were directly facilitated by the Raja of Sirmaur's failures in governance. By tracing the royal family's trajectory from despised rulers to exiles to East India Company subjects, the fluidity of the political landscape is laid bare, as are the shifting allegiances and modes of self-presentation that were employed to gain the support of external powers. Indeed, by the time the royal family was reintroduced to the kingdom, its subjects openly preferred the alien regime of the Gorkhas to their rightful rulers. Exploring this paradoxical turn of events reveals the significant effects of chance and individual agency in the shaping of West Himalayan kingship during the early colonial encounter. as became apparent soon after the Sirmori defeat at Chindiar. The death of its ruler in battle placed Sirmor on a steady path towards annihilation. Faced with a depleted treasury, disloyal ministers, and unruly tributaries sobered by his brother's demise, Raja Karm Prakash II reigned 1795 to 1806, death 1826, was precariously positioned by the beginning of his reign. The third of four brothers and an inheritor by chance, both his elder brothers had died childless. Karm Prakash lacked formal training in governance, and his accession, like that of his predecessor, required the active intervention of Sirmor's patron state of Patiala, discussed in Chapter 1. Deputed from the plains, Rani Sahib Kaur, the chief minister of Patiala, oversaw the coronation, lingering in the capital of Nahan for months to ease tensions with the successors' rivals at court before returning to the plains. Over the following 2 years, the Raja entrusted governance to his late brother's ministers, who abused power under the sanction of his name, but often without a reference to his will. In a poor attempt to assert authority, the Raja executed the state wazir and his treasurer, sparking protests under the leadership of his half-cousin Mian Kishan Singh, a popular military leader with close ties to Patiala. Mian was a title that the Pahari Rajputs adopted in the event when Mughals were trying to create sovereignty alliances, and they were sending their relatives to the Mughal court, partly due to violent coercion, partly due to the need for prestige, and they adopted the Mughal title of Mian. After a brief raid of Nahan, Kishan Singh seized the prosperous tract of Narayangarh in the plains, which became the base of the opposition's future contestations. The aversion to Kam Prakash within the state was compounded by the encroachment of superpowers on the kingdom's territory. In the plains, the unification of the Sikh missiles of the Punjab by Ranjit Singh Sandawalia saw the few lucrative plains tracts that still answered to Nahan fizzle away. Mindful of the new master at Lahore, Patiala reduced its support of the mountain state at the turn of the century, reclaiming the hilltop site of Pinjore that had been bestowed on Kirat Prakash and his descendants in 1760s to 70s. Closer to home, the Raja lost control over the Bara Thakrai, 12 lordships of the northerly hills, to Handur, while the garrison installed in the lowland valley of Dera beyond the Yamuna was similarly evacuated, allowing the rapidly advancing Gorkha armies to claim it in 1803. Kishan Singh was the son of Kanwar Ishri Singh, the younger brother of Kirat Prakash from a Rakeli concubine, and thus a half-cousin of Karm Prakash. Kishan Singh's armed support of Patiala in the 1770s, you can see Griffin, year 2000. The opposition leader seems to have lost Narayanagar in 1807, which Lahore then entrusted with Sardar Fateh Singh Ahluwalia. Kirat Prakash fixed the border along the Ganges in 1773 and was cremated on its banks shortly afterwards. A Dharma Patra renewing the boundary agreement with the Gorkhas was signed on 27 July 1792. On Dharma Prakash's deployment of Sirmori troops to Dehradun, see Williams 1874. On Kathmandu politics, see Stiller 1973. One interesting that I noted when Panditji was being interviewed by Nitish Rajput on the podcast was that he also mentioned that his father passed away, and he actually had the support of Shivji Bhagavan, Om Namah Shivaya, when he went to the pilgrimage to Srikhand. And coming back, he also had to walk 3 days. So that made like a deep impression on me. And when he said all this, like Nitish was actually quite like expressionless to me. I'm kind of surprised like he didn't say anything like, oh, I'm so sorry. So that's like kind of the cultural difference I see even today. Yeah, so interesting things. While Bilaspur helped delay the Gorkha advance into Sirmaur by a pecuniary docur and by certain stipulations, the threat of further conquests raised grave concerns among the hill chiefs. Cognizant of the Nepalese designs on Lahore and Kashmir, the mountain emperor of Kangra attempted to preempt their advance through his territories by supporting Mian Kishan Singh of the Sirmori opposition with the assistance of Raja Ram Saran of Handur. The Mian was to replace Khan Prakash as sovereign in Nahan with a view to instating a competent and militarily capable regime that would serve as a buffer between Kangra and the Gorkhas. As the Sirmori Chronicle reveals, these plans quickly backfired. It was in ways not entirely clear. Khan Prakash learned that Kishan Singh and the Handuriya were plotting his murder with Makkar Ahalkar, cunning state servants, who were related to the recently executed ministers. The Raja withdrew from the palace to the isolated fort of Kangra in the inner hills, not to be confused with the Katoch fort of Kangra for protection. Kishan Singh and his men followed in close pursuit, laid siege to the monarch, ravaged the countryside, and ultimately lured the royals into battle. The death of an officer who closely resembled the Raja during the fighting spread euphoria among the assailants, who consequently slackened their hold on the fort. As night fell, Khan Prakash and his entourage made their escape through a back door, walking for several kilometers towards the Garhwal border. Garhwal is in modern-day Uttarakhand. Arriving in the eastern town of Khalsi, the royals were informed of the coup's fruition at Nahan, where the Raja's younger brother, Ratan Singh, had been crowned following the news of Khan Prakash's death, because it was someone who looked like him at Kangra. Believing his brother to be the Putli puppet of evil-minded clerks, the fugitive Raja turned to the Gorkhas across the river for support. Convening with the commander of Nepal's Western Front, Amar Singh Thapa, the Raja followed procedure by objecting to the Gorkhas' infringement of the Ganges boundary, a symbolic gesture given that the Sirmori troops had been withdrawn from Dehradun 2 years before, and proposed creating a Sangathan Stapit united front against the usurpers. Thrilled like a blind man who'd stumbled upon a pair of eyes, Amar Singh Thapa sent his forces across the Yamuna at Paunta, whence they sped up the Kyardadun to Nahan to reinstate Khan Prakash as the sovereign. So to say this, saying a blind man who'd stumbled upon a pair of eyes, Jaisa ki ande ko do aankhein mil gayi ho. It's raining outside. I don't know if you can hear it. Having left a force to oversee affairs in Sirmaur, the invaders joined their chief ally of Bilaspur on the Sutlej and triumphantly pressed on towards Kangra, where they were to be embroiled in a lengthy siege. The change of tide was strongly felt in Sirmaur. As the immediate facilitator of Gorkha expansion, Khan Prakash was spared his neighbor's fate of escaping to the plains as a fugitive. However, his role became largely ceremonial since his beleaguered subjects quickly came to prefer the conqueror's more efficient administration. The Gorkha retreat from Kangra in 1809, compounded by the Sirmoria's position, compounded the Sirmoria's position. Having failed to supply troops and resources during the siege of Kangra 1805 to 9, oh my gosh, that's 4 years, the Raja sent a Brahmin envoy. Brahmin, I don't know actually, but yeah, he's a Pandit, to greet the Gorkha general in atonement for repeated violation of promises. Unfazed by the gesture, Amar Singh Thapa executed the emissary, signaling his intentions towards the Raja. Informed of the messenger's fate, the royal family fled to the capital for the second time in less than a decade. For Khan Prakash, this departure was his last. Representing kingship in exile, 1809 to 15. A latecomer to British territory, the unpopular Raja of Sirmaur had little social or material capital. Since he had fled Sirmaur in 1803, the opposition leader Kishan Singh had positioned himself as a valuable ally of the EIC, East Indian Company, and most likely candidate for reclaiming the kingdom in the upcoming war with Nepal. Supported by both Patiala and Handur, Kishan Singh was a man of consequence, whereas Khan Prakash had descended into an absolute state of misery without those resources which many of the lesser chiefs had secured. Although the British had already arrived at a fairly clear idea of their future collaborators in the hills, the Sirmori royals persistently sought to turn their hosts in their favor. With no apparent goods to deliver, the grandiosity and legitimacy of the exiled family's lineage became the chief currency with which to petition the foreign masters of the plains. The archived communications between Khan Prakash and the EIC reveal a gradual sobering on the unceded monarch's part. While early petitions display an ignorance of East Indian Company norms and improbable demands for armed contingents to chastise refractory zamindars and requests that the Gorkha general allow the Raja's return as per former engagements, later documents are significantly more subdued. Instead of insisting on political and military aid, Khan Prakash became firmly focused on securing financial support. Regardless of content, the petitions were uniformly framed by elaborations on the banished ruler's noble antiquity and its contrast with his current circumstances. In describing his patrimony, Khan Prakash conjured a fantastic image of a kingdom spanning 500 kos on the hills, and that also includes several parganas, which are situated below, a depiction second only to William Finch's inflated report of the mighty Prince of Khalsi from the 1610s. The various calamities befallen the ruling house were similarly narrated at length, and its downfall poignantly captured in the final paragraph of a petition submitted some 4 years after the royals' arrival in British territory, which was slyly capped with yet another request for financial aid. The years in exile had clearly taken their toll. The burning desire for revenge and restitution that dominated earlier pleas gave way to humbler demands. For villages, not necessarily in Sirmaur, that would maintain a lifestyle consistent with the petitioner's perception of self, there were additional reasons for this conciliatory tone. On a strictly physical level, the Raja's visage was marred by symptoms of syphilis that precluded his participation in public events and diplomacy. On a practical level, the Raja and his advisors had developed a more realistic assessment of the legal constraints under which the East Indian Company operated. Rather than tediously repeating demands for restoration, the Sirmauri court in exile was attentively studying and adapting to its future master's legalistic niceties through Bengali retainers familiar with EIC